information, especially when doctors are writing these clinician notes that are freehand and don't have any backing, but can very quickly work to personalize medicine, which is revolutionary. So from then, I went on to the opportunities where I was really outsourcing and building to learn it on my own, rather than from that school standpoint that you had mentioned.
Gotcha. And if you were a student right now, like you have it here, how would you go about learning AI right now, today?
That's a great question. So I think you all are very lucky. It's so easy to find so many resources out there. A lot of companies, incubators, to Headstarter have this mission to teach, and I think that's a great way of getting involved. So I think the education side first, and then second would definitely be the project. So getting really hands-on with it. I don't have as much of a technical background, but I think it was so important for me to be very technically first in order to be able to talk about this space, in order to, again, sound appropriate in this space as well. So again, finding these opportunities online, being parts of projects and in small groups as well, and then being a part of a university system as a whole, I think always provides opportunities, whether that's with incubators, academia, or just local industry startups themselves.
Any particular sector you would focus on?
That's so my answer would probably be a little bit different because I'm here specific. So because of that reason, some of the technologies that I'm really excited about and about is again the ones that are streamlining information, helping the burden with healthcare administration. So ambient listening is a really big one where there is an AI tool listening in the background of doctor and patient interactions, and then taking those clinician notes for them so doctors can have more face-to-face time with their patients themselves, helping with, again, mitigating disparities with all of the data that we have. Those are kind of the spaces that I'm more interested about. So I won't go on too much in case it's a bit too specific of an industry.
That's really cool. I actually didn't know about that being used there in the doctor's office. So one question I have is, going into the whole like startup life, wanting to build something, obviously we know why you wanted to do it, but how did you go about building?
That's a really great question. So I think the how is important to first have a team of people that you trust, that you can work with. And then again, the quality of their work, is going to match yours. So in terms of the how, the most important thing I think is being able to find a good team to begin with. I don't think that you can necessarily do anything yourself to the best of its capabilities. So definitely starting very small as well. It doesn't have to be a massive team. We started off with a team of 3. So it was me, my co-founder, who's also very passionate about more technical founders. So finding people that you can push their skills off of is a really good way to start. And just also balance, right? Constantly bouncing ideas off of them is another great way to go about starting your own event.
And then how did you go about the scaling up portion?
That's a good. In terms of my company Olea, we are targeting underserved populations in a lot of global regions. So in terms of scaling, I think the first market that we had tried to tackle on were the ones that we had direct connections in. So in Jordan is where we first began implementing within the Safari refugee camp. And that was because we had an ambassador on the ground on a Fulbright scholarship who we knew was well accredited and could connect us to those NGOs on ground. From then, we kind of looked into relevancy. So the mpox epidemic in Africa was a really big market that we thought could we could break into, and then also take advantage of because of its urgency and relevancy. So from then, we looked to recruit specialists in that region and then really build from the ground up. So we knew that we weren't specialists in that region, but we wanted to scale it to parts of Africa where mpox was expanding. So that was one tactic that we looked into, was hiring, recruiting, and looking towards specialists, and then also moving with urgency, I think was a big one for scaling.
Now, as you are continuing to scale, I know you're mentioning potentially wanting to partner or hire interns and from potentially Headstarter Fellows. What are qualities you look for in candidates and potentially some experience or project experiences?
Okay, so that's a good question. I think that while we were initially starting with the recruiting process, when we were interviewing candidates, one thing really stood out to me, and that was really people who were self-starters. So when we saw that people advocated for not only themselves, but they were super passionate about the projects that they've worked on, it really stood out to us because I think as founders, you really need to have that sort of spark. And when we see that from candidates themselves, whether they're passionate about our problem or their own projects, we could see that shine through, and we knew that they would be great for a team because again, they'd just be more driven, they'd be more desirable and more meaningful to contribute to the mission as a whole. So again, showing that you're passionate, driven, and just very proud of the projects, I think gives us that sense that you're a self-starter, and being a part of a startup, it's quite ambiguous. So you're not always tasked with assignments on a very daily basis or on a schedule. You might get quite ad hoc type of projects and tasks where we want people who are very fast, super, again, driven, ambitious, and we see that from those self-starters.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because I think whether the startup life or even like when you're going through interview process, big tech, like I used to reach out to a lot of people on LinkedIn to try to get a referral, right? And I would reach out to like literally like 30, 50 people from a particular company, and people thought that I was insane for doing that. But hey, I'm the one who wanted to succeed, right? So I think a lot of people maybe are like a little scared to be vulnerable, to be out there, but it's only to your benefit, right? So I think that was good for the soft skills. Any technical skills, project work that you look at?
So in terms of the technical skills, we know that everyone has to start with somewhere. So that's why we're not as concerned as the technical skills, because I know that you can learn that on the job as well. Obviously related to the startup that we're working with, people who are familiar with LLMs, build LLMs, know how to train them, the data processing side of it as well, the analytics suite. I think that's kind of the stack that we're looking for. But I honestly do believe that some of those soft skills can compensate for those technical skills, because again, those are things that we are happy to teach on the job with our technical team, and really just prefer, again, some of the softer skills.
And what are some North Star's goals for you or your business?
Sorry.
North Star, like future goals, 5-year goals for you or your business?
Great. So I can speak a little bit about the business itself. Some of our biggest goals for the business is being a thought leader in this AI and healthcare space. Not only do we want to bring these tech solutions to these underserved communities, but similar to what Headstarter wants to do is we really want to build this community of health tech enthusiasts and empower these community leaders in these underserved regions with the tools and content to create and develop for their own selves. So I think it's amazing what we're doing here, but we're not leaders in these communities that we're serving, and ultimately we want to empower them with the tools, the content, and ability to advocate and create for their own communities and uplift them really from that suite of it.
And I just have to ask this one question because there's been so much debate about it. Can AI or like robots actually replace doctors?
That's a good question. So I had done a big research project working in AI and medical imaging, and that was the first, I think, pathway where pathologists thought that their jobs would be taken over by AI and computers 20 years ago, and they still exist. So they were scared of that 20 years ago, back when, again, it wasn't the buzzword that it is today. So I think, again, good debate to have, but at the end of the day, it's only going to be a tool, I think, that can help streamline and improve outcomes if used ethically, and again, regulated in a way that empowers patients rather than creates this disparity that does exist in healthcare and technology.
Cool, cool. I want to open up the floor for audience Q&A, but before we do, can we get who's got a question? Okay, nice.
What God keep in mind? Yeah, so again, ethical, I think transparent, a lot of people, especially the users, they're not well versed in what AI might be. So we want to make sure that we're very transparent with how we're training our model. Again, the information is making sure that it's up to date. So I think that's a really big one. responsible AI is something that we're really trying to advocate for. So what that necessarily means in terms of governance, I think is important. So those are some guidelines, making sure it's responsible, ethical, transparent are kind of the top ones. If that answers your question.
Yeah.
Okay, yes,
What did LLMs in your company do?
sorry.
Like
Uh-huh.
you use
Oh, yes,
LLMs.
yeah. Okay, so exactly what they do is first is for health literacy and education. So users can interact with this platform and better understand different diseases, infections. We also want users to be better advocates for themselves as patients. So before they go into a doctor's office, knowing exactly what questions to ask for a doctor, and then doctors to also be aware beforehand. So before they even come to clinic, having a sense of an idea of what users have been interacting with, the questions that they've been asking. And then second to that, I think would also be the scheduling. So making sure that we're able to connect patients with the is near them and giving them relevant information. So again, if it's an epidemic and if the exact guidelines are happening, the most relevant ones and current ones.
So it's an LLM trained on all the data that asks for help.
So yeah, we are the research, like validated research that we're training it on, making sure that it's up to date with the guidelines of that country as well. So those are some of our training sets. Thank you for the questions.
I think there was one. Yeah.
My name is Adil. I have a quick question. So I've also worked in the biotech industry this summer. I was just wondering, like, what are the pain points in AI integration with the biotech industry? What's your question?
That's a good question. So we're not biotech specifically, but rather healthcare. So I think a pain point for healthcare in general is just streamlining it within different departments of a healthcare system. So specifically for the US, every single department has a different system that they are with patients, using with doctors. Something that we've seen with research is every system is so different that it's really difficult to integrate a very common, I think, AI tool across the board. So that's one pain point specifically in the healthcare, but for biotech, I can't speak to it as much. But thank you for your question as well.
Any other questions? Yes.
So I love your whole company.
Yeah.
It's really cool. You're working with foreign clients, right? Or foreign countries. Now, US is very regulated.
Yes.
You have PII. For those who don't know, PII is called Personal Identified Information. And then you have HIPAA rules,
Yes.
which is like why you have to check I'm older than 13 when going to YouTube or please. It's much more rigorous like that for healthcare in the US.
Yeah.
Now, are there things like that when you go to countries like Jordan?
Yeah.
And by having not those barriers, is that good for you? So you can do like more, you know?
That's a good question
Yeah.
as well. So something that we're trying to do in order to still stick to regulation is work with intermediary NGOs. So we're partnering with the United Nations, WHO, so organizations, AHA, that are based in the US and I think operate abroad. So we're using them as kind of the intermediaries to go around that regulatory framework. But I know what you're saying in the sense that with the lack of regulation, especially with healthcare, it can make it easier. But we, again, because we're trying to build for this responsible, ethical use of it, had thought about it with going through these larger organizations to kind of combat that issue of different regulations in different countries. So yeah, thank you for that.
Cool.
All right, another round of applause, please. All right, Simra. Here. So, please. Simra engineer at Deloitte. Oh,
Oh, actually,
oh, okay, so I think cloud as a whole has been growing industry for the last decade or so. It's been slowly gaining popularity, but definitely gaining within the tech use itself. So I have a lot of insights to unpack and I've heard it. So would you like to introduce yourself?
For sure. There you go. My name is Summer Sheikh, and I currently work as a cloud engineer in Deloitte. One misconception that I do want to clear up is I do not work for Deloitte Consulting. That's the number one thing that happens to everybody's head. I work for Deloitte Global, which is more of like an DevOps, site reliability. These are words that you've heard of before. So they all do come from the same bucket, which I'll get into a bit later. But I wanted to cloud, and cloud just made sense. I felt that it was the basis for everything. Like if you're building an application, you need infrastructure to scale it. That's where cloud comes. You want to make it, not dependent on live, like actual physical databases. Cloud comes in. Cloud is such a big role, but it's something that is growing and something that I feel like a lot of companies will start to use more and be more dependent on.
So to clarify, for people who might not know, could you explain cloud engineering as
Well, it gets very expensive, it gets very strenuous, a variety of other problems. So what cloud is that it brings these databases on the internet kind of. So it's like a virtual reality type of thing. And all of the information is basically stored on the cloud. So when a company wants to, let's say Amazon in the beginning, when it had like 100 customers, right? But you want to make it scalable and be able to serve 300 customers, right? That's where kind of cloud comes in. It ensures that all the data is stored online. It ensures that the Amazon itself is able to serve 300 customers, and it just goes on from there, including cutting costs, making it scalable, latency, etc.
so I'm getting very flexible, cost-efficient compute, storage, networks, all that good stuff, right?
Exactly.
All right, cool. So I know for general software engineering, you need to do projects, internships, and there's kind of like a set scale way to get into there. For cloud engineering, what is it? Certifications, projects? Could you give us like a little bit of a roadmap?
For sure, that's a really good question. So as you know, the three big cloud providers are Azure, GCP, which is Google Cloud Provider, and then there is AWS, which I'm pretty sure everybody is aware of. So basically, the way that with software engineering, it's mostly like leak code, side projects, etc., right? But for cloud, it's more of like certifications. So each cloud provider has its own introductory certification. And while you're studying for these certifications, there's lots of YouTube tutorials, Udemy videos. There's something called Cloud Academy, Academy, where it's basically like the Udemy, but for learning about cloud. And while you're studying for the certification that you're going to take, you go through all of these different demos, you go through all of these different side projects. So for cloud, you can go through YouTube videos and build like pipelines or a side project, but majority of it is based on the certs, but also all of these 3 different cloud providers, they provide free access to students or free access for like a month to 90 days where you can actually go into the interface and start building. And a good idea is, let's say that you have a CS project and you want to make it, like build a virtual machine off of it or put it in a virtual machine. You can actually go on one of these 3 cloud service providers and actually kind of deploy it onto a virtual machine and how that works. There's lots of YouTube videos. There's ChatGPT as well, just to kind of give some insight.
I think one of the best ones I've seen was AWS Educate,
Yes.
free program. Yeah. And kind of on the theme of that, so that's how you get into the field. On a day-to-day basis, software engineers, we typically write either front-end, back-end, full-stack code to build web applications or potentially mobile applications. What about cloud engineering? What do you write or what do you do?
That is actually a very big question. Good question, my bad. So I think with cloud, it's more scripting. So there's like PowerShell, you can also use Python for scripting. It's more or so like you have to automate a lot more your conventional backend coding. You'd use tools like Docker to kind of docker your project. You'd also there are some infrastructure tools. So overall, cloud is very big on infrastructure. So there's tools like Terraform, which kind of automates the entire building of resources or creating of resources. Let's say you want to create like 50 VMs, right? You're not going to go into the cloud server and create 50 VMs manually. No, you can just put it in Terraform and you can actually just get it done in a minute or so. So cloud has its own set of tools. There's CI/CD pipelines, continuous delivery, continuous integration. There's also Jenkins, and there's a variety of different tools as well. So very different from software engineering, but very I feel like the barrier to entry is a bit more flexible and more easier than software engineering.
Interesting. So on that point, so going forward, one big question a lot of people are concerned about is AI going to replace software engineers? And we cannot have literally a whole night's worth of debate on that. What about cloud engineering and future prospects in this upcoming decade for cloud engineers?
That's a really good question. So actually, based on what I've read online, cloud jobs are on the increase. And the very simple reason for that is, as you know, all these AI and machine learning models, they require a lot of data, or they need to be trained, or they need to be deployed and all of this, right? So basically for that, you need cloud. You need to be able to, there's a section of cloud, it's called ML Ops, or section of cloud, site reliability and DevOps, it's called ML Ops. And ML Ops basically, and then